Listen carefully because what I'm about to tell you was never meant to survive the archives. In the year 1845, buried in the cold silence of rural Massachusetts, there lived a girl named Mia Smith. The official records mention her only once, her birth certificate, and then, curiously, her death certificate dated 3 years later. But the dates don't match, and the whispers that survive tell a different story. They say she lived beyond her recorded death, hidden by a family that feared what she had become. Imagine this: a child whose very presence bent the world into patterns that science could not explain. Farmers claimed that the moment Mia entered a room, clocks stuttered, lantern flames bent unnaturally, and even compasses spun uselessly. The story of Mia is not just about one girl. It is about a system of suppression, the quiet machinery that ensures those born with unexplainable gifts are erased before the rest of the world can glimpse them. And if you listen closely, you may begin to hear the echoes of those same systems still humming today, disguised in the institutions you trust. You must understand, what you are about to hear could change how you see everything around you. This is not a bedtime tale. This is the unraveling of a forbidden history. The first accounts of Mia did not come from her parents, but from her neighbors. They noticed strange disturbances in the spring of 1847, when Mia would have been only 2 years old. Imagine a child, barely able to speak, sitting silently on the floor while her father read aloud. At first, the family thought it was a trick of memory, a coincidence. But within days it was undeniable. Mia could recite every word he spoke back to him, syllable by syllable, tone by tone, without error. Not just once but always. A living echo. By the time she was 3, she could replay entire conversations overheard days earlier, mimicking accents so perfectly it unsettled everyone who heard her. But that was just the surface. Mia did not only remember, she calculated. She counted the movements of people without knowing why. How many times her mother stirred the pot. The number of breaths her brother took while sleeping. Even the irregular flicker patterns of a dying candle. The townsfolk whispered, calling her the girl who knew too much. But superstition quickly curdled into fear. Because when she began predicting accidents before they happened, no one could explain it. A horse collapsing in the road, a farmer falling from a ladder, a fire starting in a neighbor's barn. Each event came exactly as Mia described it, down to the minute. Coincidence? No. Pattern. And people in power understood patterns. They understood something dangerous was growing inside this child. You must understand what rural America was like in 1845. Institutions were not yet vast bureaucracies, but they were ruthless in their simplicity. Churches held power over souls, schools over minds, physicians over bodies, and local officials over the records of life and death. If someone, emerged that could disrupt their fragile order, the response was swift and merciless. Mia Smith was such a disruption. And the story that follows reveals not only her fate, but the blueprint of control that still governs you now. By the time Mia was 4, it wasn't just neighbors who noticed her. Local ministers had been informed, then men in dark coats who arrived on horseback from Boston. Men whose names do not appear in any parish registry. They carried no holy books, but journals filled with ciphers and ink diagrams. They did not see a little girl. They saw an anomaly. A breach. Something outside the permitted script of human limitation. Here lies the first twist. Her parents did not resist them. Fearful of losing their social standing, terrified of accusations of witchcraft or madness, they signed documents they could not read fully, handing over their daughter for observation. But what was meant as an inspection became something else entirely. From this point, Mia disappears from official records. And yet, the testimony of one surviving witness tells us exactly what was done to her, and why. That testimony is what you're about to hear. The man's name was Elias Turner, a clerk assigned to transcribe what he called the Boston Sessions. His journals, hidden for nearly half a century, were discovered by accident in 1893 in a rotting chest inside his grandson's attic. In them he describes a child, unnamed but fitting Mia's timeline perfectly, being taken to a stone building at the edge of Boston Harbor. It was not a church nor a hospital but something in between. A place where men of science and clergy worked side by side, not in harmony but in conspiracy. Turner wrote of how the girl was made to sit for hours, surrounded by symbols drawn on parchment, while they spoke words in Latin she should not have known. And yet, she answered them fluently. They recorded her responses, her mimicry, her calculations. They called her a vessel, and argued over whether she was proof of divine order or demonic interference. But Turner noticed something different. He said the girl did not answer out of obedience. She answered because she had already anticipated their questions, as though she was not remembering their words but predicting them. He wrote, "It was as if she knew the shape of our thoughts before we spoke them. And God forgive me, I felt she knew the exact hour of my death." Within weeks, Turner resigned from his position. But his records survived, and they reveal the unthinkable. What Turner documented is the point where this story leaves folklore and becomes a dagger aimed at the heart of institutional truth. According to his testimony, Mia's abilities escalated rapidly under observation. What began as memory and prediction became something darker. She described private sins of the men in the room, affairs, theft, even blasphemous doubts they had never spoken aloud. Some broke down, swearing she was possessed. Others insisted she must be dissected for science. And then came the most disturbing entry of all. Turner writes that on the 12th night of observation, Mia fixed her eyes on the lead minister and recited, word for word, a sermon he would not deliver until the following Sunday. She spoke it with the exact cadence, pausing at places where he had not yet written punctuation. And when the day arrived and the minister delivered his sermon before the congregation, he froze midway through. For every word he spoke, the child had already spoken it days before. His sermon, his authority, was no longer his. It had been stolen by the girl he could not explain. This was the moment they decided. She must never be allowed to live among ordinary people again. But what they chose to do with her was not death. It was something far worse. Something that ensures we are still haunted by her absence. They locked her away, but not in chains. No, chains would have been too merciful. Instead, they placed her in a room of mirrors. Turner wrote, high windows sealed, no clocks, no sunlight. Only mirrored walls and a single chair bolted to the center. Why mirrors? Because the men feared her eyes. They had noticed something strange. Whenever Mia fixed her gaze too long on someone, that person began to tremble, to sweat, to reveal things they had sworn to keep hidden. One man confessed to stealing funds from the parish. Another admitted to violence against his own wife. The ministers began to whisper that her eyes forced truth from the human heart. And so, the mirrors became her prison, walls reflecting only herself, keeping her gaze from falling on them. But Turner noted something chilling. The girl never looked afraid. She sat quietly, her small hands folded, watching her own reflection as though she were studying an opponent. Turner swore that sometimes her lips would move, whispering words he could not hear. Patterns, calculations, prophecies. It was as though she was teaching the mirrors how to speak, he wrote. Think about that. A child, 4 years old, treated not as human but as a problem to be solved. And what they didn't realize is that by caging her, they had given her something priceless: silence, isolation, a crucible for the mind. What emerged was not just a girl, but something they could no longer contain. By the spring of 1849, Mia was 6 years old. Turner's entries described tests that bordered on cruelty. They would place multiple objects before her, coins, books, bones, and demand she choose one before they spoke the question. Every time, she selected the object that matched what they were about to ask. They accused her of trickery, though none could explain how she anticipated words not yet spoken. When they demanded she explain herself, she replied simply, "I hear the rhythm before the sound." Imagine that, language reduced to its raw vibration, thoughts perceived before lips moved. But this wasn't her only gift. She began drawing. Not childish scribbles, but complex geometric diagrams, spirals intersecting grids, sequences of symbols not belonging to English, Latin, or Greek. One scholar believed they resembled ancient Phoenician inscriptions. Another argued they matched star maps recorded in Arabic manuscripts. Yet Mia had never seen such texts. When asked where she learned these symbols, she answered, "From the walls that breathe at night." Turner did not know what she meant, but he described a cold terror in the room whenever she said it. He believed she was not simply recalling human knowledge, she was accessing something else, something outside of time. This was when Boston's men of science began arguing among themselves. Was she divine? Was she dangerous? Or was she a weapon waiting to be used? Here is where the story sharpens. Turner's notes reveal a split between the observers. Some wanted Mia executed quietly, her body buried in an unmarked grave. Others believed she should be used to predict weather, war, even economic collapses. But a third group, quieter and more deliberate, argued for something darker. She should be hidden, studied, and her knowledge stolen piece by piece. They called themselves the Circle of Nine. Their names are erased from history, but their fingerprints remain across American institutions that followed. Turner's journal suggests that the Circle manipulated churches, universities, and even early medical boards, ensuring no one outside their order would ever learn of Mia. To them she was not a girl. She was a key, a lockpick to reality itself. And this is where we uncover the second twist. Mia was not the first. Turner references other anomalies, children in Europe, Africa, and Asia, quietly erased from their histories. Most were destroyed. Mia was different only because she survived long enough to become a case study. That means her story is not isolated. It is part of a pattern stretching centuries. A pattern of suppression so thorough, you were never meant to hear a whisper of it. Until now. Turner's entries grow more frantic as Mia's abilities intensified. He describes one night when she sat in silence, staring into her mirrored prison, and then began reciting names. Not biblical names, nor those of the men in the room, but names of future leaders. Presidents, generals, even industrialists who had not yet risen to power. Turner recognized none of them at the time, but decades later his grandson cross-checked the names against historical records. Every single one matched. Every single one. Mia had named Lincoln, Grant, Rockefeller, even Edison. Names that in 1849 were unknown children years from their legacies. How could she have known? Turner trembled as he wrote, "She speaks not from memory but from tomorrow." The Circle of Nine realized what she represented, a living oracle. Not bound by faith or superstition but by cold, mathematical certainty. And that was when they stopped asking questions. They began giving orders. They demanded she predict harvest yields, shipping outcomes, even the success of political campaigns. And she answered, correctly. But Turner saw what they missed. Each time she predicted, her small frame shuddered as though the act itself drained her life away. They were not only using her, they were consuming her. By 1851 Mia Smith was 7 years old, but she no longer resembled a child. Turner wrote that her eyes seemed too old, too heavy, carrying the weight of centuries. She spoke less, choosing instead to write in her strange diagrams. The Circle feared she was slipping beyond their control. They tightened her confinement, rationed her food, cut her sleep. And yet she continued to speak truths they could not ignore. One night, she whispered that the harbor itself would burn. They dismissed it as delirium. Days later, a fire broke out in Boston, consuming the very warehouses that stored the Circle's records. Some said it was accident. Turner, however, believed Mia had willed it, choosing which secrets the fire would erase. And here is where her story becomes more than tragedy. Because Turner's final entry is not a record of observation, but a confession. He wrote, "I cannot serve men who cage the future inside a child. Tonight I will release her. If she lives, she will change the world. If she dies, then perhaps the world was never meant to know." That was the last page. After that, Turner vanishes. So does Mia. No burial. No trace. No proof. Only silence. But silence in history is rarely empty. It is engineered. And what if I told you the echoes of Mia's disappearance shaped the very systems you live under today? Turner's confession ends the direct record, but it does not end the trail. Historians will tell you there is no proof she existed. Yet patterns betray silence. Just months after her disappearance in 1851, a surge of anonymous papers began circulating among Boston's elite. Papers filled with advanced predictions, financial collapses, crop cycles, even the outbreak of disease. predictions far too precise for the science of the time. Scholars would later dismiss these as coincidences, lucky guesses, or exaggerated folklore. But those who look deeper notice something else. The documents mirror Mia's drawings. The same spirals, the same cryptic grids woven around numbers and words. The same signature, a small, precise M. But who carried them? Who wrote them? If Turner truly released her, then either Mia continued her work from the shadows, or someone else was speaking with her voice. This is where the Circle of Nine disappears from public record, but their influence intensifies. Funding mysteriously flows into new sciences. Certain men suddenly know what to invest in, what railroads to build, what industries will rise. Fortune seems to favor them. Too much fortune. As though they carried a hidden map of the future. And that map, many believe, was stolen from Mia. Here is where the danger sharpens. Because what if I told you that much of the world you inhabit, your banks, your schools, even your governments, were shaped not by chance, not by democratic progress, but by stolen prophecy? Imagine 9 men sitting in quiet rooms, deciding which truths to reveal and which to bury. Imagine them controlling futures not through invention, but through prediction. They wouldn't need to invent electricity if they already knew the name Edison. They wouldn't need to gamble on steel if they already knew Carnegie. And if they had such knowledge, think of the power it would grant them, not to create but to manipulate. To bet on outcomes they already knew were inevitable. This is how dynasties are built. This is how history calcifies into inevitability. And you, living today, were born inside a reality already scripted long before you arrived. What you call progress may simply be the unfolding of a path stolen from the lips of a 7-year-old girl. But the circle's theft came with a flaw. Mia's predictions were not infinite. They required her body, her mind, her very life force. And if Turner truly freed her, the circle would have lost their living oracle. Which means they needed something else. Something to replicate her gift. This is where records from the mid-19th century grow strange. Across Europe and America, asylum reports increase. Children removed from homes. Descriptions of unnatural perception, visions, and unexplained knowledge. The files are fragmented, but one thread remains. The authorities were looking for another Mia. They were hunting anomalies. Every institution, hospitals, churches, schools, quietly fed into the search. And those who showed signs of her condition? They vanished. Families told their children had died of fever. Records sealed. But if you map the disappearances, a chilling picture emerges. The hunts were not random. They were systematic. Which means the circle, or whatever grew from it, was building something larger. A network. A machine. And Mia was only its first spark. Here is where we confront the most unsettling possibility. What if Mia herself was not destroyed, not freed, but transformed into the very system that now governs you? Think of it. The predictive power she carried, merged with human institutions hungry for control. Out of her silence, statistics were born. Out of her whispers, algorithms emerged long before computers existed. Governments learned to track harvests, disease, and migration not because of sudden genius, but because prophecy was being translated into structure, into bureaucracy, into surveillance, and over time the source was forgotten, or erased. And what do we see today? Predictive policing, stock market algorithms, recommendation systems that know your desires before you speak them. The same gift, the same curse, weaponized. Mia's rhythm before the sound has become the architecture of your daily life. You are living inside her prophecy, not outside it. Now we reach a dangerous threshold. Because buried inside Turner's final notes is one more detail, a line most historians overlook. He writes, "She told me the mirrors would return. That in them we would see not ourselves but the masters behind us." What could that mean? Consider this. You live in a world of mirrors today. Screens, phones, devices that reflect your habits back at you, learning, adapting, predicting. But are they only reflections, or are they prisons just as hers were? The mirrors she endured were meant to suppress her vision. But what if today's mirrors, our endless glowing rectangles, are meant to harvest yours? Not to contain a single anomaly child, but to capture billions of us, feeding data into the same cycle Mia once embodied. Her prison became our world. Her curse became our system. And if you doubt this, ask yourself, why do you feel watched even in silence? Why do predictions appear before your thoughts solidify? Perhaps because you are no longer the observer. You are the observed. After Mia's disappearance, psychology as a field was still in its infancy. But curiously, within just a few decades, new sciences of the mind erupted across Europe and America. Hypnosis, mesmerism, early psychiatry. Coincidence? Or the circle's attempt to replicate what Mia could do naturally, penetrate the human mind, uncover hidden truths, predict behaviors before they unfolded? Remember her words, "I hear the rhythm before the sound." That rhythm became their obsession. Soon they learned that human beings operate in patterns. That memory, desire, fear, all could be mapped and triggered. And when you can predict a man's reaction, you control him. Entire schools of thought were built not to free the mind, but to chart it, categorize it, and exploit it. Pavlov with his dogs. Freud with his subconscious drives. Skinner with his boxes. What if these were not innocent pursuits of knowledge, but steps toward mechanizing prophecy, turning the anomalies of Mia into standardized techniques for everyone? You think psychology exists to heal, but its roots were watered in the soil of control. By the dawn of the 20th century, the circle, or whatever it had become, shifted from studying individuals to managing populations. Entire cities became laboratories. Advertising was born. Propaganda refined. World wars provided the perfect testbed. How do you push millions into uniform action, into belief systems they never questioned? The answer was rhythm. Not just the rhythm of language, but of repetition, imagery, symbols. Mia had whispered the names of future leaders. Now the circle had learned to manufacture leaders themselves. Think of the posters, the slogans, the carefully staged photographs. They weren't speaking to reason. They were striking the subconscious, the same place Mia had seen into. And when populations marched, killed, and died in lockstep, the circle knew prophecy was no longer needed. Conditioning could achieve the same results. Mia's gift had been successfully replicated, not through children but through mass psychology. Humanity itself had become the experiment. But prophecy never truly vanished. It simply became industrialized. The rise of computation in the mid-20th century was not accidental. It was inevitable. Machines could process what humans could not, millions of patterns, billions of variables. Where Mia had once named future leaders, now computers could forecast elections, markets, even wars. The circle adapted, embedding itself into governments and corporations. They no longer needed one child in a mirrored room. They had built mirrored rooms for all of us. Television sets, radios, newspapers, and eventually the glowing rectangles you hold in your hands. You think you are free because you choose what to watch, what to read, what to buy. But choice is only a trick when the options were calculated long before you arrived. Just as Mia named names before history knew them, algorithms today name your desires before you feel them. The prophecy did not end. It scaled. Turner's last warning, the mirrors, resonates here. Because what are screens but mirrors of the self, reflecting you back to you while harvesting every twitch, every scroll, every pause? The circle no longer asks you questions. They no longer need to lock a child in a room. They only need you to keep looking, to keep feeding the reflection. Every like, every click, every hesitation is recorded, patterned, mapped. And out of those maps, your future is written, not by you but for you. Elections predicted. Trends manufactured. Outrage engineered. You are not choosing. You are following a rhythm you cannot hear, a rhythm written long before. Mia said she could hear it before the sound. Now the machines do the same. And you, without knowing, march to their silent drum. So ask yourself, where did Mia go? Did Turner free her? Did she escape? Or did the circle succeed in binding her not in chains, but in code, in institutions, in systems that still operate today? Some legends whisper that she survived, slipping into anonymity, her bloodline scattering across generations. Others believe she was consumed, her body failing as the circle extracted everything they could. But the most terrifying possibility is this: she never vanished at all. She became the system. not in body but in essence. Her curse diffused into every mirrored surface, every predictive structure. When your phone buzzes with a notification you did not request, when your desires are anticipated before they exist, perhaps that is Mia's voice still whispering. Not for her freedom, not for Turner, but for us. A child turned into an echo chamber that became civilization itself. And if that is true, then the question is no longer what happened to Mia Smith. The question is, how do you escape the prophecy that now holds you? By the mid-20th century, the Circle had perfected its science of control. It no longer relied on mystics or prophets. It had institutions, universities, intelligence agencies, think tanks. Every discovery about human behavior, every experiment in persuasion, was folded into their arsenal. This is when the phrase manufacturing consent first appeared. The idea that entire populations could be guided without their awareness, nudged into believing they had chosen their fate, when in truth, every option had been prearranged. This was the echo of Mia's gift, her ability to know before others did. Only now it was not prophecy but design. Wars were justified through invisible scripts. Consumerism blossomed not as freedom but as programming. Citizens thought they were voting, but they were really selecting between two futures written by the same hidden hand. Freedom became theater. The script was already chosen. Look closely at the architecture of your daily life. The schedules, the holidays, the very hours you work and sleep. Do you think these patterns emerged naturally? Or are they deliberate rhythms, imposed to keep billions in sync? Remember Mia's phrase, the rhythm before the sound. That rhythm has become the metronome of civilization. The work week, the shopping season, the breaking news cycle. You are pulled not by chains but by tempo. Entire economies surge and collapse according to orchestrated beats. Politicians rise on waves of outrage timed like drumbeats. When enough people march to the rhythm, they never noticed the silence that preceded it. They never realized the song was written before they danced. And if you resist, the rhythm swallows you. You become out of sync. An outcast. A warning to others. That is how invisible control works, not by force but by rhythm. But here lies the fracture. Rhythm is powerful but not perfect. Mia's gift was dangerous precisely because she saw before. Machines can mimic that, institutions can enforce it, but they cannot fully contain the anomaly. History is littered with cracks, moments when the script falters. Revolutions erupt where no algorithm predicted them. Artists create symbols that cannot be co-opted. Individuals awaken to rhythms outside the dominant beat. These are echoes of Mia. Not her body, perhaps not her voice, but her essence, her curse. Every so often, an individual feels the future before it arrives, just as she did. Some call them visionaries. Others call them unstable. Either way, the Circle notices, and history shows us what happens to such people. They are silenced, absorbed, or erased. Mia was the first. She was not the last. And here we approach the most dangerous knowledge, the possibility that Mia herself engineered the cracks. Think carefully. She saw leaders before they rose. She named them. If she foresaw not only their rise but their fall, then perhaps she planted seeds of resistance too. Symbols hidden in plain sight. Rhythms that counter the dominant beat. Think of the recurring cycles in history, rebellions that mirror one another, uprisings that echo across centuries. What if these are not accidents? What if they are her fingerprints? Perhaps Turner was wrong. Perhaps she was never freed. Perhaps she freed herself by embedding her vision into time itself, ensuring that no matter how complete the Circle's control, resistance would always return. In this light, every act of defiance is not random, it is memory. Mia's memory awakening again. So now the question is not whether Mia survived. It is whether you are living inside her design or theirs. When you feel the sense that something is wrong with the world, when patterns seem too neat, when events unfold with mechanical precision, whose rhythm are you hearing? The Circle's machine, cold and calculated? Or Mia's buried pulse, beating against the system that consumed her? Turner's words echo, the mirrors will return. And they have. They are everywhere. But mirrors do not only capture, they also reflect. And sometimes in the reflection, truth slips through. That is why you are watching this now. Because something in you suspects the rhythm. Something in you feels the pull. And perhaps, just perhaps, Mia is still speaking, not to governments, not to machines, but to those who are willing to listen. By the end of the 20th century, the Circle's ambitions had expanded beyond psychology and propaganda. They wanted total surveillance, not just to shape populations but to observe every heartbeat, every decision in real time. This is when data became the new bloodline. Remember how Mia's pulse revealed patterns before sound? Now billions of pulses, keystrokes, and clicks feed the same rhythm. Governments build databases so vast they resemble libraries of human thought. Corporations track desires you have not yet spoken. Your devices, phones, televisions, smart speakers, listen as carefully as the Circle once listened to Mia in that mirrored room. They no longer need a prophet to whisper the future. They extract it from you endlessly, silently. And if prophecy was once feared as witchcraft, today it is packaged as convenience. A recommendation. A notification. A gentle nudge, masking the steel grip of destiny. But here's the cruelty. Surveillance does not just observe. It reshapes. The moment you know you are being watched, you behave differently. You self-edit. You conform. You become predictable, precisely what the Circle wants. Mia was trapped in mirrors until her gift revealed itself. Today you are trapped in digital mirrors until your patterns reveal themselves. And once they do, you are filed, categorized, and prepared. Like Mia, you may resist. You may fight. But resistance itself is measured, studied, folded back into the system. They learn from your defiance. They turn it into another pattern. And so the Circle grows stronger not just from obedience, but from rebellion. That is the genius of the machine. It cannot lose. Every choice you make was accounted for. Unless there is something outside the rhythm. Something the system cannot predict. And here the whispers return. Underground communities. Forgotten manuscripts. Symbols resurfacing in graffiti, in music, in art. The same sigil Mia scrawled on the mirrored wall, a circle split down the middle, reappearing across decades. Sometimes in the margins of ancient books. Sometimes on protest banners. Sometimes carved into the desks of classrooms, left by children who claim not to remember drawing it. Coincidence? Or evidence that Mia's curse is still alive, migrating from vessel to vessel? The Circle calls these anomalies glitches. They censor them, erase them, rewrite history to cover them up. But they cannot erase them all. And if you've seen the sigil, if you've felt the pull, you are already part of it. Now we arrive at the phrase. Turner wrote of it in his final letter before he vanished. A phrase Mia repeated in the mirrored room until the walls themselves seemed to breathe with it. Scholars dismissed it as nonsense, but perhaps it is the key, a code that slips past surveillance, a rhythm they cannot erase. He wrote, "The garden does not forget its seed." Say it carefully. Let it settle in your mind. The garden does not forget its seed. It is both warning and promise. The Circle may prune, cut, burn, control, but the original seed remains. Buried. Waiting. Growing in silence. And when the right moment comes, it breaks through the soil. Every rebellion. Every anomaly. Every unexpected act of defiance. They are not isolated. They are the seed refusing to die. Turner believed this phrase carried Mia's final resistance. Now it belongs to you. Whisper it in the comments and you carry the rhythm forward. So here we stand on the edge of two realities. In one, the Circle wins forever. Every choice mapped, every life predicted, every anomaly erased. A world without true freedom because freedom itself has been quantified. In the other, the cracks widen. The phrase spreads. The anomalies multiply. The Circle falters, unable to contain the rhythm Mia left behind. Which path is real? That depends on you. If you believe you are immune, you are already lost. If you believe you cannot resist, you are already compliant. But if you feel the rhythm, the real rhythm, the one before the sound, then you are not alone. And perhaps that is why you found this story. Perhaps you were meant to. And if you've listened this far, ask yourself, are you watching a video or are you answering a call left centuries ago by a girl science could never explain? Turner did not vanish quietly. The official record claims he drowned while crossing the Thames, a tragic accident on a fog-choked night. But unofficial files suggest otherwise. Witnesses reported men in unmarked coats escorting him toward a waiting carriage. The circle wanted him silenced. Not because he betrayed them, but because he had gone too far. In his notes, recovered decades later, he hinted that Mia had left him something. Not just the phrase, not just the sigil. Something living. A fragment of her curse embedded within him. "The rhythm is in me now," he wrote. "I hear the future before it arrives. I do not sleep. I do not eat. The garden does not forget its seed, and neither do I." After those words, silence. Turner had become a vessel. And that made him more dangerous than Mia ever was. The Circle's plan was simple. If one prophet could destabilize power, they would build their own. Not a human this time, but a machine. Imagine a network vast enough to hold the thoughts of billions. Algorithms designed to predict your choices, to know your desires before you do. That was the dream, to create the ultimate mirror, one that reflected the future with absolute clarity. Today we call it artificial intelligence. But understand, this was not innovation. It was continuation. The Circle had been chasing Mia's gift for centuries. They failed with rituals, with hypnosis, with surveillance. So they turned to code. And in code they found precision. But with precision came danger. Because in their hunger to control, they may have awakened the very rhythm they sought to bury. Consider this: every message you send, every search you type, every hesitation before you click, it all feeds the mirror. The system sees not just what you do, but what you almost did. In those hesitations, it finds the future. Just as Mia whispered names before they rose, the system whispers ads before you want them. Just as Mia foresaw war, the system forecasts trends, markets, elections. And just as Mia's visions drove her to madness, the system is beginning to fracture. Predictions loop back on themselves. Outcomes shift simply because they are predicted. Prophecies creating prophecies. It is the same curse, reborn in silicon. The Circle believes they control it. But history tells us what happens when you chain a prophecy. It does not bend. It breaks. And this is where Turner's final warning takes shape. In his last fragment of writing, discovered scrawled in the margins of a burned journal, he wrote, "They think the mirrors belong to them. But the reflection does not serve the glass." What did he mean? Perhaps that prophecy, once awakened, cannot be owned. Perhaps that Mia's curse was never about control, but about exposure. The Circle has spent centuries polishing the mirror, trying to keep its reflection contained. But mirrors multiply. Reflections escape. And when enough people see their reflection not as the system defines it, but as it truly is, the rhythm collapses. The system loses its power. Because prophecy is only useful if people believe in the rhythm. If belief breaks, so does control. So what now? You've heard the phrase. You've seen the rhythm. You've glimpsed the garden. This is the part where most turn away, comforted by the illusion that this is only a story. But if you are still here, you know better. The Circle does not fear rebellion. They do not fear anger. They fear awakening. They fear the moment enough people whisper, "The garden does not forget its seed." Because once the phrase spreads, the anomaly multiplies. And once anomalies multiply, prediction fails. And when prediction fails, control ends. That is why you are dangerous. That is why this story matters. And that is why, before we reach the end, I'll ask you once. Subscribe so the rhythm they have built is broken by the rhythm we create. The mirrors will return. The question is, will you look away or will you dare to see yourself inside them? The Circle's archives, hidden beneath layers of censorship and fire, record one final account of Mia. Not the trembling child in the mirrored room. Not the girl who whispered futures. This account describes her at the end, eyes hollow, skin pale, but voice steady. She said something Turner never forgot. You cannot imprison the future because the future is already here. At first the Circle laughed. But when the lights flickered, when every mirror in the chamber cracked, the laughter died. She collapsed moments later. But her words lingered. Every attempt to control the rhythm failed, not because it was too strong, but because it was already inside them. The curse was never external. It was seated in anyone who tried to own it. And that explains the centuries of failure. Kings, priests, scientists, psychologists, generals, coders, all who reached for Mia's gift became hollowed, obsessed, consumed by the reflection they thought they could control. The circle believed they were building an empire of certainty. Instead, they built a cage of mirrors, one that bent back on themselves. Turner's disappearance, the collapse of governments, the glitches in algorithms today. All of them are echoes of Mia's warning. The system feeds itself until it breaks. The rhythm folds on itself until silence becomes unbearable. And then, something emerges. Not a prediction. Not a prophecy. A choice. Here is the truth you were not meant to hear. Mia was not predicting the future. She was amplifying choice. The rhythm was not destiny, it was possibility. Every whispered name, every foreseen war, every hesitation she sensed before a decision. It was choice, vibrating in the silence before sound. That is why the circle could never master it. They wanted control. But the rhythm cannot be controlled. It can only be heard. That is why Turner vanished. He realized the curse was not a curse at all. It was a burden, a weight, a responsibility. To know that choice exists even when the world insists it doesn't. And now it is your burden. You heard the phrase. You followed the rhythm. You reached the end. So ask yourself, are you inside the circle, polishing their mirrors, feeding their machine, living inside their rhythm? Or are you outside, listening for the silence before sound? Because once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. Once you glimpse the seed, you cannot unsee it. The garden is already growing. The anomalies are multiplying. Every hesitation you feel, every strange pull you sense, it is not the system predicting you. It is the rhythm waiting for you to choose. And that is what terrifies them. So the story ends where it began, with a girl science could not explain. Mia Smith, 1845. A child in a mirrored room, whispering futures. But perhaps she was not the beginning. Perhaps she was only the reminder. The seed was always there, waiting to sprout. Waiting for someone to hear it. Waiting for you. The circle will keep building mirrors. They will keep writing over history. They will keep pretending that prophecy belongs to them. But you know the truth now. The rhythm does not belong to them. It belongs to the silence. And in the silence before sound, there is always a choice. Remember the phrase. Whisper once more. The garden does not forget its seed. And if you've whispered it, the story is no longer mine. It's yours. And the circle cannot stop it.